Hey, what's up? It's Wick for Xiaomify, and today we're looking at the all-new Redmi Note 10 Pro. Let's look at the specs, let's try out the phone, try out the camera, and let's see if it's any good. Let's go. So, here it is. In the box, we've got a smaller box with a SIM card ejector tool, a basic protective case, which we always have, and some instructions. Below that, we've got the Note 10 Pro with a wall charger and USB-C cable for charging and data transfer. Let's have a look at the tech specs before diving into it much deeper. The Redmi Note 10 Pro is 164 by 76 by 8mm in size, weighing in at 193 grams. On the front, it's got a 6.67-inch AMOLED display with a 2400 by 1080 pixels resolution, 120 Hz refresh rate, and a brightness of 450 nits. On top, it's got a 16-megapixel selfie camera with an aperture of f2.45. On the inside, it comes with a Snapdragon 732G processor that does perform a little bit better than the previous generation 730G. It's got a fairly big 5020 mAh battery that supports 33-watt quick charging. It's got either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM with 64 or 128 gigs of storage. On the back, it's got a 4-lens camera setup with a 108-megapixel main camera with an aperture of f1.9. Then we've got an 8-megapixel ultra-wide-angle lens with an aperture of f2.2, a 5-megapixel macro lens, and a 5-megapixel depth sensor for portrait images. On the side, it's got the volume rockers and the on-off button with the fingerprint scanner in the on-off button. Got all the usual features like a dual SIM card slot with micro SD card slot to expand its internal storage. It's got an IR blaster on top to use it as a remote controller. It's got NFC, it's got a 3.5mm headphone jack, and it's got dual speakers for stereo sound. So this phone is really quite impressive in its specs, and I gotta admit it looks quite nice as well. Matter of fact, the backside kinda looks like the Mi 10 Ultra with that pretty cool looking camera setup. And that's the first thing that we'll have a look at. So how's that camera on the Redmi Note 10 Pro? So I went out to take the Note 10 Pro with me, and I've been taking some photos to try it out. All of these photos I've taken with the main 108 megapixel camera in the area around this bridge. And all of these photos have quite a lot of detail. You can really see when we zoom into 100% that there's definitely some nice detail captured. Also, an exterior shot like this comes out looking very nice. When it gets darker, the noise correction seems to smooth out the picture a little bit more, but with a lot of daylight, they come out looking very, very good. At night, the photos do get a lot more grainy, a lot more noisy, but they're not really bad at all. I personally really liked shooting with it, and I've had a very nice afternoon shooting around town. You can see that some of these photos come out a little bit overly saturated, like with these flowers right here, but the bokeh, or the out-of-focus parts of these images, look very, very good, and the details of these photos are generally just really good. However, I want to point out a few small things that do make this 108 megapixel camera be a little bit different from the 108 megapixel camera as found on flagship phones like the Mi 11 or the Mi 10 Ultra, for example. And one of the downsides is tied to the processor. You can take some very stunning 108 megapixel photos. We've seen them, like these look very good. But the downside is that the processing takes a little bit longer. So there are occasions that if you snap a photo and quickly move the camera because you think you caught the picture, you'll get these motion blurred and very weird looking photos. You can see that when I zoom in, it even has some weird artifacts. And this happened to me more than once, and also created some of these very weirdly warped and distorted photos. This only happens when you've selected the 108 megapixel resolution, and normal photos won't have this problem, so I do gotta point that out. There's a solution to keep this camera stable for a second when you're snapping a 108 megapixel photo. When you keep it stable and don't move it for the second when it's capturing the photo, it comes out looking just fine, but I really had to point it out because it happened to me more than once. Also, the photos at night and in the evening really have a little bit more noise, as on the Mi 11, for example. It definitely has a little bit of different processing than the flagship phones. You'll also see a little bit more noise reduction on some of them. You can see it kind of smooths out this whole overall picture. It's not a huge thing, but I did wanted to point out that it's not the exact same 108 megapixel experience as we will have on a flagship phone. But for the price category of this phone, it can surely shoot some pretty impressive photos though. And I really had some very good ones, I have to say that as well. Then we can also shoot video with this camera, and I've tried that out as well. As the Note 10 Pro shoots 4K and HD formats, I've tried going out and getting some shots, and generally the video comes out looking quite okay. But I do gotta point out there's not much stabilization going on, if any. So the shots do come out quite shaky, especially when you're walking. During the day with enough light, the shots come out looking very good, even though they're not that stable. But when it gets darker, there's surely a lot more noise and some fuzziness in these shots, which is a little bit more noticeable with video. Next, we've got the wide-angle lens for when we need to put more in the frame, and the wide angle is quite a lot wider, as you can see, although it does shoot at lower resolution on its 8 megapixel sensor. The photos during the day come out looking quite good. When it gets darker, this one definitely has a lot more noise and the quality drops down quite fast. At night, these photos don't come out nearly as good as the regular lens, so at night you probably want to stick to using the main lens. Video in the ultra-wide angle was very stable though. It's only shooting in 1080p HD format, so I really upscaled that video to fit in this 4K frame, but it was a big difference in how stable the wide-angle video came out in comparison to the regular lens. At night, this one does get very noisy, it's very fuzzy, and the quality drops significantly when it gets dark. Then we've got the macro lens, which it's no surprise that I'm never really a big fan of, but I'll have to admit that this is one of the best macro lenses on a Xiaomi phone that I've used thus far, so even though I don't like them, I gotta give this one credit for being one of the best macro lenses that I've tried. Then we've got the selfie camera, which actually was very impressive as well. I've taken some snaps outside, I've done some with the portrait blur in the background, I've done some selfies inside, and I've used some selfie videos, and generally it was actually quite impressive. It only shoots HD videos when you're taking the selfie videos, but they weren't really not that bad. So now that we've seen the camera, how is this phone in use? Well, first of all, the size and the looks of the phone is very similar to what we've seen with Xiaomi and Redmi for over the last year. It's a very similar size, a very similar feel, and very similar in how the OS looks and feels. A big difference from many of the other mid-tier level phones that Xiaomi has is that this one actually has an AMOLED display, and that makes this one stand out quite a lot. The display has a 120Hz refresh rate, which we can set from the settings, and you might really enjoy that. It's got this always-on display, although that does shut off after 10 seconds, but will light up once you just touch the screen, and it will light up around the edges when a notification comes in. I enjoyed watching some YouTube or Instagram, and generally I am very much liking the display on it. It is running MIUI 12, which seems to do quite well on that Snapdragon 732G processor, and it can handle everything that I throw at it. The usual Facebooking, the usual Instagram, the usual email, and all the basic stuff is no problem at all. I can do multitasking, but also things like playing games. How can it handle that? Well, I did play some PUBG, and it held up very good actually. I had no lag, no noticeable frame drops, and it did seem to handle that just fine. So even gameplay up to this point was no problem, and I actually quite enjoyed it. Then how did it handle photo editing, for example? Well, I tried some of the sky replacement filters, which use AI and photo merging, and that processed very quick as well. I really didn't have any problems with the performance of this phone thus far, and I'm actually quite impressed with it. The phone can also shoot dual video, using both the front and back camera at the same time. Although these clips are recorded in HD format, it did work fast and smooth, and again, it had no problem processing this at all, so pretty good and pretty impressive. The MIUI features are exactly the same as on any other Xiaomi or Redmi phone that we've seen. and it can handle the split screen very well. It's got really all the same bells and whistles as any other Xiaomi phone, although it comes with a little bit of unneeded apps and games that I personally like to remove whenever I get this phone. I do like that it comes with all the Google apps pre-installed, so it's there. In terms of internet speeds, that was pretty much like I typically have. It's hard to exactly test, as on some days my internet is faster than on others, but it held up quite well on Wi-Fi, pretty much similar speeds to what I normally have. On 4G, the speed was, well, okay. Although I must say that I'm kind of spoiled with having 5G speeds most of the time, but for LTE speeds, I guess it was good. It was quite alright. Then the battery life, that lasted for well over a day with me, especially when you're not using the 120Hz refresh rate. It will significantly help you to save battery, but I've had my SIM card in there for weeks and I've been using it all day, and in some occasions it lasted around 1.5 days, so battery life has been pretty good to me. Then how is the sound on this phone? Well, it was actually quite impressive as it has those dual speakers, so let's just have a listen when I am playing some music or playing some games on it. As you can hear in this stereo recording, the audio is quite good. Pretty much keep saying this on every Xiaomi phone that comes out recently, but having stereo sound really helps for such a better audio experience, whether that's for music or playing games. It's just more immersive and it sounds fuller as both of your ears receive a bit of that stereo spread, so I really quite enjoyed it. Then for the microphone, how does that sound? Well, let's just listen to a voice recording. Hey, what's up? It's Wick for Xiaomify, and this is what I sound like through the Redmi Note 10 Pro. Is it any good? Well, let's find out. Let's go. Then, what do I think of the Redmi Note 10 Pro, and how much will this phone cost? First and foremost, I am very much impressed with the phone, especially for a phone in this price category to carry these specs. I really like the AMOLED display on such a mid-tier level phone. I also really like the battery life. 5020 mAh is very welcome on this phone, and it will easily last you the full day. And then the performance, which was impressive as well. It performed a lot better than I had anticipated, both with usual simple daily tasks, as well as things like playing games or editing photos. It held up well. The camera is very impressive with the 108 megapixel main camera, although that one really needs some attention from you to make sure that you keep the phone still when you're taking these 108 megapixel photos, because we've seen the distortion and the warping if you move it too fast. So that's something I would like to see improved though. Then the main downside was the stabilization that I had on video. I think this might be improved quite soon with a software update for HD video, as the wide-angle lens did have some very good stabilization, so the phone should be capable of doing that. But at the time of reviewing this phone, it was not very stable just yet, so I did want to point it out that is definitely something that needs some improvement. And as always, it's nice to see this phone have the smaller features that do add up to make this a very interesting phone to look at if you're getting a new mid-tier level phone. Like it has NFC, it's got the IR blaster, stereo sound, expandable storage, dual SIM card, headphone jack port, and the more impressive specs like an AMOLED display, 108 megapixel camera, a very decent processor, very good battery capacity, and these things all add up to make this a very, very interesting phone in this specific price category. Talking about price, how much does it actually cost? The Redmi Note 10 Pro just came out in Europe, where it goes for €279 for the entry model, up to €329 for the 8GB RAM with 128GB of storage, and I've put down some links below this video if you want to go and check it out on Xiaomi's official AliExpress store. You gotta keep in mind that this will slightly vary through different countries, but that is around the price target. Overall, I think that this phone gives you some very good bang for your hard-earned bucks. But what do you guys think? Is this phone gonna be your next phone? Is this something you're very interested in or not? Let me know down here in the comment section what you guys think. Is this something you want to pick up or not? And why do you love or hate it? Let me know down here. And don't forget to leave a little like below this video to show me that you've liked it, because I put a shit ton of effort in making these. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you have not done that yet, because I am doing a lot of videos about Xiaomi, Redmi, and the Xiaomi ecosystem right here on the Xiaomify channel. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see y'all soon. Peace!